Is split up into two segments, and the first is we have MP Ms. Bateman here to answer questions and explain a little bit about her private member's bill 6C27, an act to amend the Railway Safety Act, safety of persons and property. So with that, Ms. Bateman, welcome to the committee. Thanks for being here, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'm very, very pleased to have the opportunity to speak with you today, and I hope to answer any questions that you may have regarding my private member's bill, Bill C-627, an act to amend the Railway Safety Act, safety of persons and property. Monsieur le Président, je suis très heureuse d'avoir l'occasion.
Mr. Chairman, I'm very happy to have this opportunity to talk to you today about my bill, C-627, and to answer your questions.
Of transportation in general and rail safety in particular is one of the priorities of our government. Comme tout le monde le sait, la sécurité du transport en général.
As you all know, rail safety in particular is one of the main priorities of our government.
Isn't catastrophe of Lac Mégantic and the recent tragedy in Northern Ontario underlines and reminds us one more time of the necessity to have a secure and safe rail system and to improve the supervision and control of the rail operations as a whole. Les récents catastrophes ont souligné et ont rappelé une fois.
The recent tragedy reminded us of the need to have a safe rail system and to improve the supervision and control of operations.
Your committee, Mr. Chair, and the leadership of the Minister of Transport, Minister Raitt, who reacted in such an efficient and effective way to gaps identified in the system. Well, sir, I have found another gap that I would like to fill. Je voudrais souligner le travail de votre comité.
I'd like to draw attention to the work done by the committee and the leadership shown by the Minister of Transport, Minister Raitt, whose reaction was very efficient in remedying the gaps in the system. There's another gap in this system that my particular bill aims at dealing with.
Not allow the minister or rail crossing inspectors to close a rail crossing when it presents a risk for pedestrians, cyclists, persons in wheelchairs, or vehicles. En effet, la législation actuelle ne...
The present legislation does not allow the minister to close grade crossings that create a risk for the population.
For the entire population. Grâce à mon projet de loi, cette situation...
Thanks to my bill, this situation will be changed in the interest of everyone.
That rail safety is an issue that matters to them. As a servant of Winnipeg South Centre, I share in this vision of wanting to see our crossings safe, whether for a child riding a bike, for a senior in a wheelchair, or any vehicle. Rail crossings crisscross my riding, and the safety of them can be enhanced. That's why I chose to use my private member's bill to achieve greater rail safety in my constituency, with the happy consequence that all Canadians across this great country will be safer and more secure because of my bill. My bill is about prevention and proposes to enhance the Railway Safety Act by seeking to give additional powers to the Minister of Transport so she may intervene when required in order to better ensure the safety of citizens, property, and communities. Additionally, this proposed legislation seeks to empower railway safety inspectors so they may quickly intervene to restrict the use of unsafe works and equipments and to forbid or restrict the use of unsafe crossing work and road crossings. Mes concitoyens ont clairement déclaré.
My fellow citizens have made it known that rail safety is of great importance to them. And as a member for Winnipeg Centre South, like them, I would like to see everyone being able to cross rail crossings in safety, whether it be a child riding a bike or a senior citizen in a wheelchair. My constituency is crisscrossed with these crossings that must be secured, made safe, and this is why I decided to make use of my opportunity for a private member's bill to improve rail safety in my constituency, and in this way to improve the safety throughout the country. My bill is based on prevention, and it intends to deal with problems before they arise. The proposals are aimed at improving the Act with respect to rail safety and to confer other powers upon the Minister of Transport so that she is able to intervene as required in order to provide improved security to citizens and security for goods and property. The capacity to intervene quickly is provided to put an end to any dangerous work or the use of unsafe material. It is necessary to be able to prohibit or limit the use of crossings that are not safe.
discussion about the details later, but what I propose is that the minister and her inspectors have the power to shut down a railway crossing, if necessary, if the safety and security of any Canadian is at risk. Nous entrerons sans doute dans les détails plus tard.
We will be providing greater details, but what I'm suggesting here is that the minister and rail inspectors have the power and the authority to shut down level crossings that are a danger. I hope that all the parties will provide support
on this bill. Monsieur le Président, je vous remercie pour...
I'd like to thank you for your time and the attention, Mr. Chairman. I am now pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Attention, and it will now be my pleasure to answer any questions you and your colleagues may have. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Ms. Bateman, and we'll now turn over to Mr. Mai.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Bateman, for being here and for bringing your private member's bill. Just to let you know, we do have a bit of issues with sometimes when private members' bill are brought, especially when we deal with rail safety, as you know, and as you mentioned, it's complicated, but it's also very important for Canadians. Just were government officials consulted for your bill?
Oh, yes, yes, absolutely. As well as, in fact, I've consulted widely on this bill, not only with government officials, not only with the minister herself, not only with organizations such as CN, but also with the Teamsters. And I found, sir, that the Teamsters are very supportive of this.
Have you seen or have you read Bill C-52, which was brought forth by the government regarding rail safety?
You know, I don't have them all by memory. I have started. I'm about 3/4 of the way through.
Okay. Well, because in Bill C-52, which we haven't debated yet, but there are provisions that actually deal with your bill, and they actually repeal what your bill is bringing forward. I'll give you the example. Article 39 says 39(1) subsection 2 to 7 apply if Bill C-627 introduced in the second session of the 41st Parliament, blah blah blah, said if subsection 25(1) of this Act comes into force before section 2 of the other Act, then that section 2 is deemed never to have come into force and is repealed. So we're talking about your section.
Do they mention 627?
It actually, yes. So
wow.
It deals. So we're,
I'm honored.
Well,
I'm honored.
I mean, it makes it more complicated for us when we look at rail safety. When you bring in something where you said you consulted with the government, but then the government actually repeals what. And now we're at a place where, well, if your bill goes forward, then we have to repeal your provision. So.
Well, you know, I defer to the officials of the Ministry of Transport on the details of the upcoming bill, but the motivation of my bill was what happened in my riding, and I'm sure you feel the same about yours.
And that's why I understand your motivation, and I understand that you're really, you know, you want to protect your people, constituent, and people across Canada, obviously. Yeah. Yeah. But it's just when there's a private member's bill that deals with something where the government has to review the whole regulatory regime. When we start bringing pieces, and we've seen that happen a lot with the Conservatives, with the criminal code, for instance, where we had a lot of private members' bill dealing with the code. But when we add everything up, it makes it even more confusing. And you know, having a bill coming from the government that is actually repealing what you're bringing forward, and without you even knowing what the bill from the government brings.
Well, it presumes that this is going to pass, so I thank you in advance for that. That would actually be wonderful if it does pass. Well, it
doesn't presume. It says if it passes. So because right now we're wondering whether or not that Bill C-52 from the government is
I can't speak to the government bill because I'm not the minister and I'm not the officials. I'm not the deputy minister.
Sure.
But what I can speak to is that this is a bill worthy of your support because this is about rail safety in all of our communities.
It's just I raised that concern. Also, if you look at your bill in section 4.4, paragraph 4, you include the term. I'm sorry, safety of persons and property. I'm sorry. the definition safe railway operations already includes safety of persons and property. You've included that in the bill. Can you tell us why you think that the definition wasn't sufficient?
Well, and you know, I worked very closely with the minister's officials, and as you know, when you do a private member's bill, you're assisted by a lawyer in the House of Commons to develop the proper and appropriate terminology. But for ensuring, like when I explained to them, so I'm a chartered accountant, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to speak to the legalese, but what I will speak to is that I told them very clearly what my intention was. In 2007, we had a lady in a motorized wheelchair crossing
I'm sorry, my question is more regarding, because we have to understand when there's an amendment to a bill or to a definition, something that's being added, we have to understand why it's being added and why.
Well, and you know, hopefully this will explain that. There was a lady whose motorized wheelchair, got trapped in the rail crossing. Had it not been for a Good Samaritan who pulled her to safety while the train was coming, she would not be here with us today. And so that was a pretty traumatic thing that happened in my riding, and it was actually before I was the Member of Parliament. But based on explaining that, the lawyer at the House of Commons indicated that we would have to have persons, property, and
but I don't know if
safety of persons and property.
But I don't know if you realize that the definition of safe railway operations in section 4.4 of the Act already includes the safety of persons and property, which is something.
Well, when I presented this, and when I asked ministry personnel if this could, like if the minister could shut a crossing, if they could shut a crossing, the ministry advised me that that was absolutely impossible under the current legislation. They cannot. So the minister doesn't have that authority, and neither do her safety.
I think you're referring to another provision of your bill. So that's why, I mean, because we're going to debate clause by clause, and I'm trying to understand what has been added and why it has been added. And that's why I was raising some concerns where we have things that are being added in private members' bill, but without, I guess, understanding the whole impact. So that's why that was my question to you. Why add that section of the definition where actually that portion where it already exists in the other part of the bill? So thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Merci.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll now move to Mr. McGinney, 7 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Hi, Ms. Bateman. Thanks for joining us. I want to commend you for your work on the bill. It's a positive step forward, and I think Canadians will appreciate it. In my own city of Ottawa, we suffered a terrible tragedy some time ago when OC Transpo was hit by a train at a level crossing, and people lost their lives, and many people are still recovering, and families are still traumatized. So I think if this goes some distance in preventing this kind of accident in the future, it would be very positive. I guess just following up on my colleague's line of questioning, where I was going to go as well, there appears to be some duplication here between your bill and the government's Bill C-52. Maybe just to cut right to it, are you prepared to have your bill amended so that it's actually integratable with the government's measures, or fungible, as we would say?
Well, through the chair, to Mr. McGinty's question, I am here in the interests of the safety of Canadians, and of course my motivation is the safety of people in my riding, as I'm sure that is every one of us on any side of this House of Commons. That's our motivation. So absolutely, I will be flexible, and I will be guided by the chair and the parliamentary secretary in that to be rigid on something like this makes no sense. But if we can work together to make a difference and to actually accomplish greater rail safety for families, for for elderly people, and for people driving cars across the multiple rail crossings, that would be wonderful. And I look forward to working with you on that.
So the second question I want to ask you is about the fact that 1/3 of level railway crossings in Canada today, there are 5,000. My understanding is there's 5,606 of those across the country. Only 1/3 are equipped with warning devices today. When you were doing your research, did you consider being more prescriptive in your bill, not simply imbuing inspectors with the power to take action, but did you think about becoming more prescriptive and talking about that 2/3 of level crossings that don't have, they just don't have those warning devices in place?
The warning device mechanism was in place at the riding that is at the crossing that is in my riding, and it was the motivation for my bill. So I don't see, I didn't want to be prescriptive about a piece of machinery that clearly didn't work in the interests of safety of people. So I did not pursue that at all. I just wanted, for example, if a crossing, if the rails area has been improperly maintained, or a family driving across, a little bicycle gets caught in it, I wanted inspectors to be able to say, you know what, that's not safe, we have to fix that. And to have teeth, so that, which apparently at present is not the case.
My third question involves whether or not you, when you were doing your research on this, did you backcast in the sense of asking questions about the sufficiency of inspectors? It's one thing to empower inspectors to take specific action. It's another question as to whether or not we have enough inspectors in place to actually use the new power that you want to confer upon them. You would agree?
Well, I actually, in backcast, I've learned a new word today. That's good. My focus was on the safety. My understanding when I was asking the questions and doing the research was that while we have inspectors, they don't have the power to actually say this riding in this crossing in Mr. McGinty's riding is unsafe. We're going to close it until repairs have been made. So that was my lens that I looked through it. I welcome any additions and amplifications that you would make to this private members bill, because it's always better when you work in partnership.
Okay. I have no other specific questions unless you want to add something else in terms of your bill.
No, that's fine. I very much appreciate your support, and very much appreciate that we're working together for the safety of Canadians. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll move to Ms. Young for 7 minutes.
Ms. Bateman, I want to say thank you so much for being here today and for presenting your bill to this committee. And as you noted in your opening comments, it was a tragic accident at Lac Mégantic that has moved this Minister of Transportation, the government, and this committee to study the safety of rail safety across Canada. And I know that we have all been working very hard to this end, and it's wonderful to have you here presenting your private member's bill, 627, presenting another aspect to make our railway system even more safety. So I'm very impressed that you've undertaken this to do this. I wanted to just note that that some important facts and figures, and that is that it's noted here that of the 23,000 grade crossings under federal jurisdiction, that 18% of all rail accidents in Canada is at grade crossings. And so that's a substantive number, 18%. That's almost, 1/5 of all accidents, which is at rail grade crossings. So again, I think your bill is very timely. It obviously speaks to the point, and that is safety for Canadians and for rail. My question to you is, in your consideration of this bill, which I think is quite comprehensive, you talk about railway safety, safety of persons, and the safety of property. And there are obviously some gaps in previous legislation, which is why you proposed your bill. Can you speak to this, why you felt that you wanted to separate out those three aspects, and why your bill will fix the gaps?
Well, I vividly recall the discussion we had in July with personnel from the Minister of Transport's staff and also from the House of Commons staff. And the House of Commons staff, I mean, I came forward basically saying, this is about safety. This is about making sure that people, not only in my riding, but in every riding, are just a little bit safer. And I was incredulous when I found out that the minister did not have the authority to shut an unsafe crossing. We were guided on the inclusion of the persons and property piece by the House of Commons lawyer. And again, I speak as a chartered accountant, not a lawyer. We were guided and told that that was essential for the nature of the bill, what we were trying to achieve, what I was trying to achieve. First of all, I went and checked with the Minister of Transport, and they said, that's a great idea. That would be helpful. But it was the House of Commons lawyer who actually guided us on that inclusion.
So are you saying that in your research, what you discovered, that even if a railway crossing was unsafe, and people knew it was unsafe, as in the case that you mentioned in your own home writing, that the Minister of Transportation had no jurisdiction or no power to shut that down?
Exactly. Not only did the Minister of Transport have no authority to shut down an unsafe crossing in any of the 308 ridings that exist right now, but further, neither did her huge team of railway inspectors, safety inspectors, and I just thought we need teeth in that. And
so when you considered your bill then, was it shocking to you as a Member of Parliament that there was this gap in railway safety?
Well, absolutely, and not only to me, but to many of my constituents. We have one area in my riding, and this is it's actually funny because I've worked so hard. There's a crossing. I think there's 40 trains a day, right in the heart. It cuts through my riding, and 40 trains a day, and people whose families live on this side, invariably are signed up to hockey on the other, and so it's a source of enormous frustration. And I've been working incredibly hard to make sure that we somehow can work with all levels of government to have an underpass at that riding, which happens to be or at the crossing. I keep calling crossings ridings. Sorry. To make sure that that is not only the problems are repaired, but that it goes under. But I think it's people, when you find out that an accident could happen and the minister has no power to shut it. Yeah, I was incredulous, and I think a lot of my, this was my motivation for this bill, because that one crossing in my riding is such a source of frustration and constant, people are always complaining about the number of trains and counting them and saying, I was waiting for 19 and a half minutes today. And so they're, it didn't take much from my riding to find out that this was a priority. And in fact, we had a lot of feedback. So. Now,
I know that in Vancouver itself, the minister was there just a few months ago announcing, and we opened a new overpass to allow the trains to safely and people to and so I completely understand what you mean in terms of that safety for people, for the rail, for property as well, and also obviously that the minister is working very hard to ensure that these crossings are safer across Canada.
Absolutely, and if you're going to make investments in infrastructure, all things being equal, if you get an investment in infrastructure that also increases people's safety, it's great. So I'm glad you got that.
Mr. Chair, can I just check my time?
Just a little less than 1 minute.
Okay. I noticed that in your bill, there are certain aspects of it that I wanted to also quickly ask you about, that you have, by presenting this bill, established enforceable safety, standards for crossing, clarifying the respective roles and responsibility of railway companies and other parties, and promoting the collaboration between railway companies and road authorities. Now again, I think that the public, and certainly in our communities, like I was very surprised in reading your bill that didn't currently exist. Can you speak to this?
Well, I absolutely, with great pleasure. I was equally surprised when I found that didn't exist currently. And the language you refer to, standards are an integral and important part of absolutely anything. We have service standards, we have accountability standards. We have all kinds of standards, and so absolutely for that to be integrated was critical. Roles and responsibilities, I mean, it's very important in a collaboration. I mean, municipalities own property going up to the railway, then it's the railway line that owns the actual part. I mean, so you have to collaborate and you have to determine exactly the roles and responsibilities of the respective. For example, we had one crossing that was repaired recently, and it was a joint project and a huge negotiation project actually between the municipality and the rail company. Successful negotiation, I might add. So yeah, all those things matter.
So what you say?
Okay, sorry,
you.
your time has expired. We now move to Mr. Urdiga, 7 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and Ms. Bateman. This bill, C-627, is so important, especially around municipalities where we have children playing and using the crossing to go back and forth to school or home or whatever it may be. You know, the biggest thing, what kind of feedback did you get from municipalities regarding your bill?
Well, you know, I've had very positive, I don't know of any municipal official, as I don't know of any federal official, who would be against safety for families living in their community. And I know I spoke to the various councillors, and further to the comments I made earlier to Ms. Young, you don't just, these things are organic. They grow because of the comments from people in your community. They grow from comments. We always work together at various levels of government, and certainly the municipal councillor in the area, well, 2 of them are so supportive of this, and we've had numerous discussions about the crossings. In fact, the City of Winnipeg today just declared a crossing in my riding as their #1 priority for infrastructure with the Build Canada Fund. So I'm pretty thrilled about that. But yes, you're absolutely right, Mr. Urdiga. These things grow through conversations, not only with constituents, but with other members, and the municipalities have been incredibly supportive, and as have the councillors.
Yes, and, you know, the municipalities also probably own some of these crossings, or are responsible for them anyway. So when does CN take responsibility? When does the municipality take responsibility for upgrades if needed? Is there a definitive line where one outweighs the other?
Well, that's a really interesting question, because when we, and again, it was part of the reason that this became my private member's bill. Through the, we got a lot of calls about one crossing, and that one crossing was you know, a rail. There was a rail company involved, and also this is to your comments earlier about the collaboration with the city councillors. My goodness, the city councillors' lines were lighting up, my lines were lighting up, and there were real problems on the maintenance at one crossing. So, you know, obviously you're working in partnership once you realize it's a problem. We started making calls to the company, and that's when we found out just how complicated it was. My staff were absolutely incredible, the way they were you know, trying to get help for people in the community who had identified a security weakness in their community, and we found that it was a process. Now, eventually, we were able to succeed and get some remediation, not 100% remediation, I might add, but a little bit of remediation in the area. But that opened my eyes to how cumbersome, and I was kind of amazed that the Minister of Transport had no authority over this ability to shut down something that a vast number of people in the community had identified as a serious security issue. Yeah, for personal safety, you know. Yeah. So.
And I understand we do have a federal program where they contribute up to 50% for eligible costs. Mm-hmm. Is there any reports to determine how many crossings are how do you put it, at risk to public safety. Is there a study done, or is there going to be a study done on all the crossings that are risky?
Golly, that sounds like a great idea for your committee. You know what, there have been numerous studies done on this, and I guess, you know, what is unsafe to one person might be, and that's might be slightly different to another. That's why I think it's very important for us to give the minister the teeth in the legislation to actually, and with the minister's ability to have an equal playing field right across Canada, and make those determinations.
Now, when you were researching your bill, is there a current grading system, whether crossing is rated from 1 to 10, 10 is good, the best, and is there anything of that nature currently in existence?
You know, I wasn't looking at that grading piece. I was looking at the safety piece. So I defer to the Ministry of Transport. I'm sure they will have a wealth of information on that. Yeah, that's, yeah, we were so focused on the ability to actually fix something. And so focus and you get things done. Eh?
That's good. How much time I have left?
Minute 20.
Minute 20. Okay, in one of the clauses, the Minister of Transport gives the Minister of Transport the authority to dismiss public objection to any railway project if the projects are deemed to be in the interest of public, in the public interest. Can you expand on that?
You said public, I'm sorry, I don't have it all by memory. Public objection if it's in the public interest?
Yes.
Yes. Well, the whole modus operandi out of this private member's bill is in the public interest. What I was trying to make sure that the minister, you know, if people in your community come forward and say there's a serious problem here, I wanted the minister to be able to address it, and so that's why it's in there. Yeah.
Okay, which stakeholders did you consult with? Obviously, you consult with the municipality. Was there any other groups that you had in-depth conversations or requesting feedback?
Well, I've spoken to a number of organizations, a number of people, a number of, well, the municipality, of course, a previous mayor, a previous councillor, and the current councillor. I also spoke to some companies. I also spoke to, and some companies have very good maintenance systems, and some don't. And but I spoke to a number. There have been a number of irritants regarding rail safety over the time, which probably fed into this private member's bill. And I consulted also with the Teamsters, and I was well supported. I think the reality is people want, and people might quibble about an and or an or, and I'm flexible on those things, but people, whether they're in a corporate organization, a municipal government, a federal government, or you know, a collective of workers, a union, they want rail safety because we all live in this country, in this community. So there was wonderful support.
I'm going to have to cut you off there, Ms. Bateman. I'll now turn it over to Ms. Moran, 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup. J'ai une question plutôt technique.
I have a technical question to start off with. You're referring to the security of goods, security of persons or property. My colleague put a question to you about why you felt it was necessary to add this. But it seems to me that in clause 32, what you are adding is the importance of security of persons or property or in the environment. I would be interested in knowing why you added the term environment in this particular instance. I would say that my answer is fairly similar to what I've already said. The answer I gave your colleague. I realize that you did receive advice from certain people, but nonetheless, it is your bill. Why is there only the term environment mentioned only in one of the 5 instances you talk about?
5 times in your bill.
C'est clause 32.
Oui. Pourquoi on ajoute le mot environnement dans la section 32 et pas dans les autres sections?
Why do you add the term environment in this one instance as opposed to the other cases? Could you refer me to the full clause?
Following after subsections 3.1, 3.2, if the minister is on the opinion that the railway operation poses a significant threat to the safety of person or property or to the environment, the minister may, by notice, send the person responsible for the railway operation, order the person to take the necessary corrective measures. Okay, so why is in that section why in that section do you mention the word environment and not in the previous one?
I'm going from memory on this complete piece right now, but in truth, there are dangerous goods being transported in trains. And I think we are very foolish if we don't recognize that and accept that.
Yeah, I agree. Why don't you mention environment in the other sections?
Well, and you know, for example, there's a hue and cry about pipelines, but right now, if we were trying to approve rail development, it probably would have more difficulty than the pipelines are. So that I believe, and I will get back to the greffier of the committee with exact citation, but I believe it was related to goods within the trains. We'll get back with exactly the reason. Et je m'excuse.
And the reason why you didn't add environment in the others?
Reference. But I believe it's because of the dangerous goods, Madame.
Est-ce que vous acceptez?
Would you be willing to have an amendment for us to add the term environment in the other cases? I think that would be up to the committee. But your reaction to this, as I said to Mr. McGinty, I'm very flexible. And your own personal opinion on this? I am very flexible, as I said, very flexible to any amendments that might be suggested. My purpose here is rail safety. So you agree with it then? Thank you. There was a question that was put to you by one of my Conservative colleagues, and you said in response that there was a huge team of inspectors in Canada. My Liberal colleague asked me whether there were enough. Do you know how many inspectors there would be in Canada? This is something that I would have to check with officials. Is it your view that there is a sufficient number of inspectors? You do not know exactly how many there are, but...
And je dois clarifier.
Sorry, just
okay.
Point of order, Mr. Watson.
Yeah, in fairness to the member, the questions like that are not necessarily inherent to the bill we're discussing, but secondly, those are matters for departmental officials and/or the minister to be giving in response to members' questions, Mr. Chair.
And I think the member said that she didn't know, so I'm sure that she'll look into that. But Ms. Brand? Yeah.
On that point of order, la membre nous a mentionné à plusieurs reprises dans son...
There was something mentioned a number of occasions. It was said that they would like to have a sufficient number of inspectors to apply, to enforce the rules. If we do not have enough inspectors, and of course, I think this is an important point. I think that it was useful for me to ask how many inspectors there were.
I think your question is probably should be asked of the officials. Is there enough that to look after, business, so to speak, if Ms. Baseman's bill was implemented? So probably anyway.
Merci. Je vais passer d'abord sur un autre sujet.
I'd like to turn to another subject now. You said you wanted to give power to the minister so that she would be able to shut down these crossings. I'd like to know who would be responsible for paying the cost when the minister decides to shut down a rail crossing. Would it be the railway company? Would it be the federal government that would assume the cost? Does the Department of Transport have money for this? Because the federal program that my colleague referred to, lots of municipalities do complain about the fact that they have trouble, it's not accessible enough when it comes to costs and repairs. If a level crossing is shut down by the minister and the rail company does not pay, for how long can it be left to shut down? I'd like to thank you for the question. I would say that you have decided to focus here on the cost. I think that we have to ask ourselves, what would the cost for a great disaster amount to? The purpose of this bill is purely preventive.
Is prevention. What is the cost if a child is flattened under a train or a senior? We have to stop. There's huge costs. And by the way, so prevention has underlined every single part of the changes that both this committee and the Minister of Transport have made. So obviously we'll have to, there was a huge cost when the OC transport bus was hit. There was a huge disruption in my riding very recently when a truck ran into a car, and fortunately nobody was killed.
Yeah, I'm going to have to cut you off there, Ms. Bateman. You're out of time. Now move to Mr. Braid, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Ms. Bateman, for your concern about this very, very important issue, the excellent work that you've done advocating for these changes through your private members bill, and the work you've done representing not only all of your constituents, but the one in particular that sort of motivated you and inspired you to move forward. There have been one or two questions about the consultations that you've done. I'm curious specifically about consultations that you may have done with the municipality in your case, and any particular feedback that they may have provided on the merits of your bill.
That question, and there's no question. I've spoken to many people about this. Inevitably, the consultations with the municipality would gravitate to the Waverley underpass, which has now been decreed as of 2 hours ago, the #1 infrastructure priority for the city of Winnipeg. But we also sent out a direct mailer and asked people, questions, and this went to every member in the community. And we thought the question was going to be about infrastructure. We were actually trying to distill what the key infrastructure pieces, what people cared about most. What we found once they mentioned a certain underpass, they would then expound about the safety issues and the problems. I mean, we got calls even in our riding. There were boards flying up and hitting cars as they drove by at one crossing. So the information has come to us in many ways. People care about safety. People care about, they don't even, I mean, obviously human safety is #1, but people don't want their cars being damaged with boards flying up and hitting them as they go over the crossing at about 20 kilometers an hour. So yeah, it came from a number of sources. The municipality, to your question, inevitably knitted the concerns into the underpass that they want under the Build Canada Fund for the Waverley Underpass. But it was quite wonderful to see the almost unanimous support for this, and the fact that people say, yeah, that makes sense. And I guess to Ms. Young's earlier question, people were amazed that the minister couldn't close down something that was unsafe in their neighborhood. So.
You've touched on perhaps one or two examples. Let's, thinking optimistically, assuming that the bill is successful and it passes, could you give us some examples of the types of situations that will be dealt with or prevented as a result of your bill being in place and in force?
Oh, well, that was my total motivation, so I'm very happy to do that. But I think of my children are now 17 and 23. But when they were a little bit younger, we'd go for bike rides and we'd go over that crossing and or other crossings on the way to City Park. And you want to make sure that when you start across with a family of 4, you finish with a family of 4, and that nobody's got their bike caught in an unsafe crossing point. So yeah, we were certainly that was one of the motivations. Certainly the lady whose motorized wheelchair got caught, and thank goodness for this Good Samaritan who helped her out, because she was trapped under and elderly. She was waiting for a hip replacement apparently, and just wedged under this motorized chair. So she got pulled to safety. But it would be nice. There's a seniors home on one side and a little Italian grocery store on the other of the crossing, and it would be really nice if it was safe for seniors to go safely. Very important that cars not be damaged on their way. And of course, just the fact that the community is back and forth. I mean, both parts of the community are an integral part of the whole community. You want it to be safe to transverse that area. So that really, there's one crossing in particular that was my motivation, but every time I drive anywhere, there's a lot of crossings in my riding, and that's Western Canada, you know.
Do you have any thoughts on how the elements of your bill, again, once it's in force, may positively influence how grade crossings are built, how new ones are built in the future? Have you drawn that connection at all, and can you provide any thoughts on how this might result in safer grade crossings being built in the first place?
What a wonderful thought. What an absolutely wonderful thought. It wasn't part of our deliberations going into the bill, but clearly with the negotiations, I mean, even when you look at a repair to an existing crossing, which we had, one of our crossings was closed last Thanksgiving weekend, and the negotiations that resulted between the municipality and the rail company, I think it's very important to think that best practices would result in making future crossings safer.
Mr. Sullivan, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Bateman, for your private member's bill. Following up on my colleague's questions about the closure of a railroad crossing, who pays for that? And when you say closure, obviously that could be simply closing the road. Does it also mean closing the rail? Who would get the priority?
Well, I hope the safety gets priority always. That's the motivation. You know, when the OC transport happened in Ottawa, I don't think anybody was talking about priority, about the, you know, who gets priority. I mean, you have to deal with safety. The whole premise of my bill is prevention, like preventing disasters before they occur. So, you know, the cost of closing a rail crossing, like for example, the one that got closed, and I can only speak from what I've personally experienced, but last Thanksgiving weekend, there was a rail crossing closed in my riding. It meant you had to go down, you know, probably 3/4 of a kilometer one direction, and 2.5 kilometers the other, and those were both access points. So it wasn't impossible. You could still get to the other side. It just took a little bit longer.
So closing means closing roads, not closing rails, for sure.
Well, you know what? They had to repair that rail crossing, so I'm sure that the rail the rail company in question reorganized their trains. That particular line that was closed for 4 days last fall. I mean, it gets about 40 trains a day, and it didn't for those 4 days. So,
Okay.
so I suspect that they reorganized their schedule.
Would there be some kind of standard by which the minister would use to determine that a rail crossing should be closed? And I say closed as opposed to putting a bridge or a tunnel around it. Right now, the City of Toronto uses 200,000 as the number. So if the number of trains times the number of cars is 200,000 or greater, that's a dangerous crossing.
So they multiply the number of trains by the number of cars?
It's a standard in
a
North America,
24-hour period?
Yep. And if it's more than 200,000, if that number is more than 200,000, that's one that the city starts asking the federal government for help to try and, because the City of Toronto, you can't close all the roads around rails or the city would grind to a halt. So, and the one in my riding is costing the provincial government $400 million to put in a rail to road separations. And who's got that money? Who is the federal government prepared to come up with the kind of money that's required to do this kind of thing?
Well, I think your question is a little bit beyond the scope of my bill, although not necessarily beyond the scope of what you
But if your bill says the
on
minister can just arbitrarily say, I'm closing this crossing.
My bill does not say the minister could arbitrarily close any crossing. My bill says that if people or property are at serious risk as defined by the minister or as defined by the railway inspectors and provided to the minister will then have the authority to close in terms of preventing a potential accident.
In terms of the number of inspectors, we learned not too long ago that there were 117 actually rail inspectors in Canada. That number went up by 1 after Lac-Mégantic. Clearly, your bill would require considerably greater numbers than that of rail inspectors if they're to be inspecting all of the literally thousands upon thousands of road rail crossings that exist across this land. There are probably in the order of something close to 10 or 20,000 of those crossings. And to have inspectors inspecting all those is a full-time job for a lot of people. How are we going to manage that if we only have 117 inspectors just to keep the whole rail system safe?
So the focus of my bill is to make sure that the rail inspectors who are currently on the payroll, every 117 of them, and I defer to your numbers on that, actually is able to take action if they identify an issue where there is personal issues of safety to the community involved. I don't think that takes more people. I think that gives teeth to the people we've got, and that's the intent of this bill. This bill does not require money for, I mean, we're already paying those people. We're just giving them the tools to be more effective and efficient.
Thank you, and I think your question, Mr. Sullivan, is one for department staff as well. So, last question, Mr. Komarnicki.
More a comment, and you can sort of tell me if I'm on the right track or not, but as I read your legislation, it refers to amendments to the Railway Safety Act. And in fairness, the Act does say if a railway safety inspector is of the opinion that the standard of construction or maintenance of a line work or railway equipment poses a threat to safe railway operations, that's the way the Act reads, you've added the words, or the safety of persons or property. It would seem that the first definition is pretty general, hard to say what it exactly includes, but you specified it particularly to be sure it does include the safety of persons and property. So it really is a clarification and has a specificity to it so that we all know what it means and can take action if that is in question.
Yes,
There you go.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Kormanicki, and to you, Ms. Bateman, thank you very much for appearing here today.
My pleasure.
Thank you for that, and I'm
Thank you
sure
very
the
much.
committee is enlightened on your bill. So thanks again. We are going to suspend for a few minutes and till our next witnesses come in. We'll call our meeting back to order, and with us we have officials from CN, Mr. Finn, Mr. Vina, Mr. Farku. Thank you very much for being here today. And I understand, Mr. Vina, you're going to lead the presentation. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation. Nice to see most of you I've seen in the recent past, so nice to be here. Thank you very much, Chairman. And to my left is Michael Farku, VP Safety and Sustainability. And to my right is Sean Finn. He's got a long title, but we'll just shorten it up, CLO and Corporate Services. So I'm sure some of you have met Sean before. So thank you very much. We appreciate, and I'll start with the first slide. I'm sure you guys all have the presentation. And what I wanted to make sure today is go through, and maybe a little longer than I normally would, 3 or 4 minutes. But let me, if you can just have me take the time to go through and then answer any questions that you have after. And I'll go as quick as I can because there's a number of slides here. But so away we go. So first of all, we appreciate the opportunity to be here and update on CN's safety initiatives and the efforts that we have undertaken to further strengthen our safety management system. We acknowledge that the past year has been difficult for a number of reasons, which we will review. However, this has only increased our resolve to strengthen our safety programs because we are committed to the journey. And safety is a domain in which we continue to work relentlessly, and we take every opportunity and lesson learned as a means to strengthen our SMS in the areas of people, process, technology, and investment. Safety is of the utmost importance at CN for a number of reasons. First of all, it's the right thing to do because we owe it to our employees, the communities, and customers. The second point is that as a business, we recognize that safety is an enabler which strengthens service, cost control, asset utilization, and safety culture. And it is the foundation for success. This is why we work so hard to strengthen our safety management system, and this is why we exceed regulations in many areas. The first principle of our safety management system is that we view safety from a human and organizational perspective rather than only a people-centered approach. This means that we view causation broadly, and we work hard to understand most root causes and contributing factors, and we address those causes comprehensively using initiatives in the area of people, process, technology, and investment. And we also work hard to introduce as many lines of defense as we can to protect safety, because we understand that more lines of defense is better than one. As an example, we mitigate risk related to rail by performing visual inspections, ultrasound inspections, test cars runs, visual inspections, as well as rail grinding, maintenance, and I could go on. People are the strength of our company, and we have invested in a big way to train effectively and strengthen culture. If any of you have had the chance to go to Winnipeg, we built 2 facilities, one in Winnipeg and one in Homewood, Illinois. And we've done that on purpose just because of the number of people. We are 25,000 strong right now, and in the last 5 years, over 50% of the employees that we have are brand new. So we wanted to make sure we had the best facility possible, and that was built in Winnipeg. If you ever get a chance to go out there and see the facility, I welcome you, and we'd love to have you to tour you around. Investing, we continue to invest, and we increased our investments to $2.6 billion this year. CN invests proportionally more than the Class 1 railroads. And for those reasons, we have gone beyond regulations, and this has allowed us to reduce our accidents by about 40% over the last 10 years. If you can turn to the next page, and you can see the questions that we ask ourselves after the incidents that we most recently had. But just before I get to trying to answer the questions, let me take you through a few more points. In spite of our best efforts to improve safety, we saw an increase in accidents in 2014. There were many reasons for that, but one of the key reasons was the harshest winter in generations. There's some people that say it's an easier winter this year in Western Canada, but I think it'd be hard to say that it was an easy winter in Atlantic Canada and very tough winter in Northern Ontario. In fact, in February, we had colder weather in February this year in Northern Ontario than we did in 2014. But 2014 was a year of hard work and safety because we implemented a number of initiatives that strengthened our performance in the second half of the year. We implemented peer-to-peer engagement programs. We opened 2 new training facilities, which I've mentioned. We performed corridor risk assessments and invested in leading-edge technology. These technologies helped us to turn our safety performance in the second half of last year. But recently we have faced 3 accidents in the rural subdivision, which is north of Capreol in Ontario, which made us question and assess our safety initiatives. This led us to review every aspect of our safety program, and we asked questions such as, is CN safety performance in line with that of the rest of the North American rail industry? Are our Canadian operations also in line given recent trends? What specific factors should be? And I won't read the other 2, but I think it's something that you might want to look at just to give you a sense, and these are not all the questions we have, but when you have incidents occur, even if it's 1, we start to ask questions of ourselves and internally say, are we missing something? Is there something that we're doing wrong? Given the complex nature of the safety issues faced by railways, there are no simple answers and no silver bullet solutions. But CN has been determined to identify root causes and address any systemic problems it identifies fully and promptly as part of its corporate commitment to deliver responsibly. You turn to the next page, which gives the page 4, which provides a comparison of the North American industry. The first point is that the railways are capital intensive and take a long-term view of their assets, operations, and safety trends. It is important to view CN safety performance over a span of time to assess meaningful trend lines, not just on the basis of a single or 2-year perspective. That does not mean that we do not look at each individual accident that we have or injury to see if there's something that we're missing. But you do, as an industry and as a railroad, you understand that you've got the right trend line. In addition to an intense focus on each accident, CN monitors its safety performance looking at 3-year averages within a 10-year cycle. Against that framework, CN's accident rate has generally trended in the right direction and compares favorably with the rest of the North American rail industry. CN recorded one of the lowest number of main track accidents in 2013, and that solid performance, of course, when you're comparing year over year, makes it challenging. Harsh weather was a challenge in 2014. Record colds, deep cold stresses rail and wheels and can produce cracks and consequences, so it affects the infrastructure that we have. And we know that, and that's why we increase testing in the winter. We have more people out there. We do more ultrasound testing. We also saw an increase in freight volumes, particularly in Western Canada, with record volumes of grain, general freight traffic, and energy-related commodities. Full year 2014 volumes reached record levels, with carloads up 8% from the year before. The rise in volumes originated on CN's branch line in the network resulted in some increases in accidents owing to joint failures and rail fracture in Western Canada. So some of you are sitting there going, wow, he's actually telling us what it is. And that's, it's the questions that we have. We're trying to answer those questions ourselves. 2 key points. Our analysis shows that 1, CN-Canadian ratio is in line with the CN system, so it's not different for the U.S., the East, or the West, so the Canadian versus the rest of our system. 2, the CN 3-year ratio is in line with the other railroads in North America. If you turn to the next page. As mentioned earlier, we acknowledge that 2014 was a difficult year, and you can see the specific causes of the main track accidents in Canada on that page going back to 2005. However, this chart shows that the 10-year trend is positive in all cases. As an example, rail and track causes dropped from 43 to 29. Wheels and rolling stock decreased from 39 to 18. This is evidence that the investments that we are making in our people, our leading-edge technologies, and our rail and track are bringing results. In fact, CN has worked hard to strengthen its wayside detection network over this time frame, and CN has nearly 900 wayside detectors and monitoring bearing wheels, dragging equipment detectors, as well as 40 wheel impact load detectors that measure wheel impacts and rolling stock imbalance. We continue to implement leading-edge technologies by engaging research facilities and suppliers, and we implemented those detectors using a risk-based approach through our corridor risk assessments. And this has further strengthened CN's industry-leading wayside detector network. The other point is that volumes grew significantly during this time period. So when we use the absolute numbers and normalize them for volume, we note a reduction of more than 50% in terms of main track accidents. The next question was causation for us and the other railroads. Are we missing something? Are we not doing the right things into the main components that cause accidents? But in spite of our best efforts to strengthen our safety management system, accidents do occur. This is because railways face unique challenges. The first point is that railways need to maintain their plant, which includes tens of thousands of miles of rail. Second point is the rolling stock are mobile assets that can travel all over North America, and railways must accept cars in interchange from other railways and car owners. The third point is that cold temperatures have an impact on steel wheel and rails, as I mentioned before. As well, snow can degrade wheels. So instead of going into too much, I think you get the general picture of what weather does. CN and North American railroads have been very successful in using technologies to identify defects, and they use the data proactively. As an example, CN's network of wayside detector scans 3 billion bearings and 1.8 billion wheels annually and reduce the impact to just a handful of incidents. Therefore, main track failure modes relate mostly to track and rolling stock, and this applies to CN and all the other railways. This slide clearly shows CN's main track accident causation pie, which is on the left, and compared to the U.S. railroads. You can see from slide 6 that causation is almost identical, meaning that CN's accidents are caused by the same factors and the same proportions as the other railroads. It was important to understand, do we have an outlier? Are we missing something on rolling stock or rail? If you turn to the next page, we dug into and gave you some history on Northern Ontario. The chart shows a 10-year trend for this territory. You can see that the trend is showing improvement, and this is consistent with the 10-year improvement we saw earlier for all of CN's main track accidents. As well, we can see that causation is very similar to CN's system main track causation and to that of other Class 1 railroads. So the facts demonstrate that the recent issues that we faced in the NOD are not inconsistent with the long-term trend. On top of that, though, and we wanted to make sure we understood exactly what happened, because when you have 3 accidents in a close period of time in one area, you need to step back. And even if the trend line is right, we said we needed to do something. So we have put on a speed restriction in Northern Ontario until we get a clear understanding of exactly what happened. We've, at CMAs, which is census metropolitan areas, we've included that into the key train restrictions that we've put in the rest of Canada that are going to increase or decrease the speed of what we do in census metropolitan areas. We increased inspections of track and trains. We tightened up our standards even further. We've taken outside-in view, so we brought officers from other parts of the railway to take a look, and we've dealt with external experts that are going to be reviewing the issue of unit trains and how we operate unit trains. One of the questions we do get on unit trains is do we run the crew trains in any different size than the rest of the unit trains? Are they bigger? In actual fact, we have a long history. We have been operating trains that the normal unit train that we're handling for crude is around 100 cars, and we handle normally on a daily basis trains that are 150, 180, up to 200 cars. And we've been doing that for a number of years. This is not something new, and the weight of them is substantially more than what a train carrying crude would be. Turn to the next page, please. I just thought it was important to just spend a couple minutes on investment in track infrastructure. The slide on page 8 demonstrates that CN investments have been increasing consistently for the past decade. As an example, we are investing $2.6 billion in 2015, and CN's capital investment represents about 19% of our revenue. When we review investments in track and infrastructure, we can see from the graph on slide 8 also that there has been a consistent increase in our track and infrastructure investment. In 2015, this part of the capital investment will amount to $1.3 billion. This is 70% more than what we did in 2005. Quickly, I just thought I'd take you through investing in technology. I've been railroading for 37 years, started in Jasper, Alberta, and I think I mention it every time I come here, just to tell you that I'm from Alberta. But more than anything is this is not a new game for me. I've been doing this for a long time. And one of the challenges the railways face, and even talking to my own family, is the perception that we use old technology. Large rail cars, locomotives moving on steel wheels, with employees still performing manual interventions to operations and inspections of trains and tracks. The employees are very important. They inspect trains and cars as they go by. But nothing is further from the truth, because railways have left no stone unturned to leverage technology to enhance safety. Let me take you through a couple. In line with this, railways use ultrasonics to inspect rail for defects that the eye cannot see. lasers to measure track geometry and identify defects of the edge of visual detection, infrared technology to measure bearing temperatures, acoustic measurement technology by identifying potential hidden defects in bearings, force accelerometers, GPS to pinpoint. It goes on and on. Sophisticated cameras that can take a look at the track and tell you what the ties and what the rail's like and what the environment that we're operating. So when it comes to CN's track, the lines of defense have continued to increase over the years, from visual inspections, rail flaw, track geometry. And just this year, we are adding a new track geometry test car that we started about a year ago, an autonomous geometry box car, advanced optical imaging systems that identify track issues, as well as leading-edge tie assessment technologies. Another aspect is the evolution of data management. Very important to understand what the data is trying to tell you, and is used actively for preventive purposes to identify track and equipment issues that can evolve into a defect over time. Just about done, real quick. If we turn to investing in CN safety culture, page 10, because this is also a key component of what we're doing. Safety culture is the domain where railways have been active with their employees, unions, regulators, and academics. This is critically important for so many reasons, but two key reasons. First, safety culture is a catalyst and motivator that translates company policy and procedures into action. This is so important for railways because most of our workforce work in decentralized and mostly unsupervised work environment. They don't see their boss on a daily basis. Second, railways, like many industries, face demographics, and as I mentioned before, we're going through a large change in the age and the experience of people that we have. With respect to safety culture, railways have worked with their unions, regulators, and academics to define it and develop processes to measure. This is an effort that CN has led for several years, and which continues today. To refine a process to measure safety culture along its 5 dimensions of leadership, communication, two-way communications, employee engagement, learning culture, and just culture. We also modernized our training program, investing over $60 million in the 2 facilities, as I mentioned, and developed a solid process for field training. This was done with the help of senior labor leaders and St. Mary's University, where CN established a CN Center for Safety and Occupational Health and works with CN Professor of Safety Culture, Dr. Fleming, to strengthen culture. CN also organized with St. Mary's University the first International Safety Culture Symposium, bringing together broad industry, regulators, association, academics with the objective to share, learn, and strengthen culture. The people portion is very important to us, and we continue to invest to make sure we give our employees the best.
Can we wrap up, Mr. Vena, please? And,
thank you very much. Like 1 more minute,
yep,
Chairman.
No problem.
One of the common themes so far is that CN has been ahead of regulations in many areas, and this journey continues. Recent examples include our securement changes, implementation of key train policy, key crude policy, corridor risk assessments, implementation of leading-edge technologies and data management, and structured community engagement. CN continues to engage stakeholders to strengthen tank cars because this is an important line of defense. CN supports the government efforts to strengthen tank cars. CN already has a robust emergency response plan, but we took concrete steps to further strengthen it by acquiring new equipment such as foam trailers, agreements with other railways to share equipment and resources, and with the industry, with the petrochemical industry, working together to make sure that we respond. Our community outreach program was very important, and we have met a number of communities, and maybe later on, if you want some more detail, I can have Sean fill you in because he spent a lot of time working with the different communities. These slides provide only a brief overview demonstrating our commitment to safety, where we take action, and this journey to which we are committed for a long haul. Bottom line is we asked ourselves the same questions as I'm sure some of you have, and hopefully there's no questions, and then I can move on, but I don't think I'm going to be that lucky today. But at the end of it, I'm open for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bean. Mr. Mai, 7 minutes.
Merci, messieurs, d'être ici aujourd'hui.
Thank you, gentlemen, for coming here today. I have a number of questions to ask. I think it's important for us. After the accidents in Lake Megantic, you realize that people were very much scarred by what happened, traumatized. There was also an accident in Gama in northern Ontario. Following Megantic, the Rail Safety Bureau asked the rail companies to carry out risk assessments And what we are asking is to see these assessments to find out what the main issues are. As you know, people are worried, and we have no information to give them to say that everything that is being done as safely as possible. I'd like to know whether you can tell us whether you would be willing to make public these risk evaluations or assessments.
But you asked about risk assessments and whether we'd be willing to make them public. We do perform risk assessments. We do, anytime that there's a change in our operation, we make sure, because of our SMS system, that we review what impact it would have on the railroad. And when we do the risk assessments, we do give them to the government and specifically to Transport Canada. So they are available, and that's how we provide them. On top of that, when we go out and deal with the communities, the individual communities, if they have questions about what we've done in the local area, how we operate, we're more than willing to answer those questions at the local level.
Je reviens aussi in Northern Ontario. The TSB actually said that there were track infrastructure failures that may have played a role in each of the derailments. There are concerns about inspections. We've heard the government said that they're doing enough, but we don't feel they are. Can you tell us who's actually responsible for inspection? Is it the rail companies or is it the government?
Listen, we are responsible for track inspections, and we perform track inspections. And maybe I went real quick through the presentation. Track inspections are performed first of all by highly skilled, trained people that are mandated, but we also do it at a higher level. They're mandated to go over the track at least twice a week, and they inspect the track on a visual. We also do it by running an ultrasound. Again, we're mandated for 4 times a year, but we do it 14, 18 times, depending on weather, depending on the type of quality of the rail. We do it by geometry test car. So there's a lot of different ways for us to do it.
I think my point was, again, I think we're talking about self-inspection. So railway companies are inspecting their own rails. And after that, maybe with the 117 inspectors that Transport Canada has, maybe they'll have an overlook or a quick look at what's happening. So that's an issue. You also mentioned that you're going beyond regulations. You're even safer than regulations. We're not, again, talking about self-regulation. So can you give me an example in terms of track where, for instance, CN is going beyond the standards that Transport Canada, their government, has set forward?
I think in the number of inspections a week, visual inspections, we do that. I think, and I know we do it by ultrasound, the number of ultrasound tests that we go over, the geometry tests. We have the new car, autonomous rail car that will run up and down the track that's above and beyond our normal regulated amount. Right. The way we train our people is not regulated. We make sure that they pass the regulated tests or what we put in as a regulation. Right. But there is, I think if you look at most of the things that we do more because it's driven from the analysis that we do on the accidents and what's happening on the railroad. So we try to understand what's happening, what's the trend line, what is it that we can do, and every accident we look. And you mentioned that the TSB said, sorry about that.
No, just because I don't have much time, I'd like to let Claude Gravel ask questions.
I've been told I'm a little wordy. I apologize. Sorry about that.
We have 2 minutes and 2 minutes and a half. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here. You mentioned Capriol and Gogama has been mentioned, and both of those communities are in my riding. And so we were very, very fortunate in Gogama that the accident didn't happen 2.5 kilometers to the west, because then we would have had a great human disaster. But we do have a environmental disaster in Gogama. So the train derailment happened right in the river, in a fish habitat. So can you tell us what CN is going to do to make sure that the crude oil, which is heavier than water and is sunk to the bottom of the river, how is that going to get cleaned up? How long is it going to take? And how can you assure us that it's going to be 100% environmentally friendly after the cleanup?
Well, let me just back up just a little bit. So the accident did happen, and we responded with everything that we could, with multiple lines of defense to keep the crude contained, or the product contained close to the derailment site. Now, we've cleaned up the site. We're operating trains again, but we are not leaving there until we return the site to as good as we can with everything that's possible, so that the site is as back to normal as close as possible. So we have environmental engineers up there. I flew up there myself and spent time there to go take a look at the site, and I'll tell you, I really appreciate all the help we got from everybody in Gogama. I think the whole community helped us, the people from that area, and it was great being up there and being received in a difficult situation. But we will not leave the site until we've done everything that we can to return the site to the way it was before.
Okay, I was up there also, and the people are up there are very, very concerned about what happened. Your crew did great work. I can attest to that. But you just said you're going to bring it back to as good as you can. Now, can you define as good as you can for me?
Well, you know, anytime you have an incident, you do everything that is physically possible. It's not a question about money. It's not a question about bringing in the right people to do that. And we're going to do everything we can to return it as close as possible. You know, the worst thing I could say here is to tell you, don't worry about it. It's going to look exactly the same as it did at 100%. But if we can return it to 99.99%, that's what I'm shooting for. And if I can get to 100, that's what we'll do.
Time is out. Mr. McGinney, 7 minutes.
Thanks, Chair. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. I want to begin just with a couple of quick fact checks. When the minister came to committee here some time ago, she suggested not once but twice that she wanted CN here to testify. In fact, today in the House of Commons, she reiterated it for a third time. I just want to get it on the record. I wanted to have the regulator here, side by side with you, not just CN, but the regulator, because I don't really appreciate the minister trying to deflect blame. This is a partnership between the regulated sector and the regulator through Transport Canada. So I want to get that on record, Mr. Chair, very clearly. Question number one, if I could. Your gross revenues are still, quote, just north of $10 billion, Mr. Vena?
It's 12.
12 billion. So you're up $2 billion from the last time you were committee.
You remember that question?
I do. Mr. Finn, are you as well the Chief Compliance Officer for the corporation?
Yeah, absolutely.
So your job is to make sure that CN is in full compliance with standards, regulations, etc., right?
Laws across Canada and North America.
Pretty important job, isn't it?
Pretty demanding job.
Right. Pretty big thrust of the corporate sector towards compliance, isn't there?
Well, very much so.
Right. So you would say the Chief Compliance Officer is pretty much involved in risk management for the company and for Canadian citizens, right?
Not alone, but yes.
Okay.
A series of other executives also.
All right. So in the last 3 years, we've had a 1,600% increase in the transportation of oil by rail. Is that right?
Industry as a whole, yeah, probably.
I don't have the number sitting right in front of me.
Don't know that? Okay. We had the minister here, and I asked her why she was cutting $202 million, 11% of Transport Canada's budget. She said she wasn't. We looked at the parliamentary budget officer's numbers and the Library of Parliament's numbers, and those are in fact the cuts, $202 million. Your company sits on the minister's Rail Safety Advisory Committee, is that right?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Have you advised the minister to hire more systems auditors and more inspectors?
Well, it's a great question, and we're not here to dictate to the government or any government how to do that. We think it's important to work. Safety is a collaboration of everybody that's involved in it. So we work with the regulators. We are open about what we're doing. We're internally focused ourselves. We go outside.
So the last time you were here, Mr. Vena, I asked you about a number of reports, one of which was the Auditor General's report. Since then, we've had the TSB report from Lac-Mégantic. We've had this committee's report tabled 2 weeks ago. We've got the investigation progress update from Gogama. I asked you at the time, when we talked about Transport Canada, the regulator, you said, it's not, quote, it's not my job to worry that the regulator is given enough money to regulate, close quote. Do you still stand by that statement? Do you subscribe to that view? Does CN subscribe to that view, Mr. Finn?
I do. Listen, it's not up to me to decide, and I don't think it's up to CN or any company to decide. It's the House of Commons, it's the government, it's all the parties. So you guys get to decide.
Is the
that,
SMS a partnership between the regulated party and the regulator?
Well, SMS, I could go on for about an hour.
Is it a partnership between the government, the regulator, and the regulated railway company?
Absolutely. Absolutely,
So,
they review our SMS.
Wouldn't it be in the interest of CN to be more seized with some of the shortfalls at the regulator level? Wouldn't CN, Mr. Finn, as the Chief Compliance Officer, for a $12 billion corporation with 6 executive members and 23 vice presidents, isn't it in the interests of CN and its shareholders to make sure that your partnership with a regulator is properly being fulfilled by the regulator?
Yeah, and I think that with Mike Farquhar's presence on the Ministers' Committee, on our involvement through the RAC, the industry panels, we're very much focused on that. And obviously, we're looking at, if you look at the last 12 months since May got sick, or 18 months, the amount of regulation we put in place is substantial, and we make sure we comply with every regulation. But also we have views when it's out for consultation. We're very much present and make sure our views are heard. If we think the regulation doesn't go far enough, we'll be the first to say so.
Right. So has your company, as part of the Rail Safety Advisory Committee, put pressure on this government to ensure that the shortfalls that have been pointed out by 1, the Auditor General, 2, the Transportation Safety Board, 3, this committee, and 4, the Transportation Safety Board's investigation progress update for the Gogama derailment? Is your company not putting pressure on the regulator to make sure that they have the capacity to do their job? Because we've now had 2, 3, 4 independent voices saying they're not.
We look at it as we work very well with Transport Canada and the regulators, the TSB, who do a great job of looking, giving trend lines, understanding. I think we have a great relationship with them in the sense of they push us, we give them information, they ask for information.
Are you pushing them back?
I don't need to push them back. I'll
tell you
what I'm focused on.
Well, let me ask you,
what I'm focused on. This is very important.
You're focused on running the railroad and keeping it safe. I understand that. But do your shareholders agree with that statement?
I would love to answer that question.
Well, let me ask you. Weave this into your answer. Do the shareholders who own CN, does your shareholder in California agree with that statement?
Every shareholder. I'm a shareholder, and it's very important for me as a shareholder, doesn't matter the size of the shareholder, that you have a company that's responsible, that understands what's happening, that reacts properly, has the right amount of funding, and does everything they can possible to run a safe railroad. That's what's important.
Has your board of directors been seized with the findings of these successive reports which have pointed out the shortcomings of the regulator and its job, the job it's doing? Has your board of directors been seized? Mr. Finn, I'm going to ask you, you're the Chief Compliance Officer. Sure. Is your board seized with these reports, and what actions is it taking to ensure that your partnership with the regulator, you partner with them, you sit in safety committees, right? You say that you're pushed, Mr. Venna. Can you tell us, last question, can you tell us?
So we have obviously an Environment Safety Committee of the board, which is chaired by Maureen Kempston Darks, and I can tell you that we ultimately, every board meeting, every committee meeting, we update on regulatory matters, and they would see in those matters changes in regulations, proposed regulations. I can tell you that our CN board is very much seized of these issues, and they're discussed at every board meeting. So rest assured that they're very much aware of it, and they make sure that we adhere to the regulations, but also adhere to our own safety practices at the utmost.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Finn. Mr. Watson,
I guess you won't let me answer that question.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Venna, thank you for your being here at committee again. You participate, of course, in Scotic's hearings into safety management systems in the transportation of dangerous goods last year. I appreciate your return today for this briefing. I have a couple of very brief questions related to the slide presentation you gave us, and then I want to turn to the TSB's interim report on Gogama. I'll start with page 8, CN investment in track infrastructure. You mentioned your 2015 capital budget of $2.6 billion, with $1.3 billion for safety and integrity of the network, particularly track infrastructure. You say particularly track infrastructure, but not exclusively. So how much of the $1.3 billion is actually for track infrastructure?
The majority of the 1.3 billion is rail, ties. I don't have the
exact. Is it $1 billion? Is it 800,000? Is it?
I would say that
or 800 million. Sorry.
It's more than $1 billion.
Is it more than $1 billion? Okay, so that's okay. So it's not 1.3 billion in track infrastructure. It's something under that. Okay. I understand that the thrust of your presentation today, if I understood it correctly, was that effectively that CN is, in terms of its spending on safety and its accident ratios, are in line with the rest of the industry. I appreciate that you're measuring against your competitors, but it begs the question why you're not measuring against the standard. The question, if you will, of Mr. Vena is, I imagine some are wondering how many derailments that CN is prepared to accept because its spending and its accident ratios are in line with its competitors.
That is not the way we look at it at all. The nature of the business that we're in, and we're moving rail cars and rail and weather, and it's an outdoor sport. Every accident for us is important. It's every accident that we'd like to deal with and see if there's a way for us to get down to zero.
I'm just not sure if you have the right metric, if you're measuring against the rest of the industry instead of the responsibility itself. I'd like to turn to the TSB's interim, their news release related to the derailment and fire of a second CN crude oil train near Gogama, Ontario. I have a few questions about that. In it, they mention that there are a number of permanent slow orders in the rural subdivision. Are those exclusive to the three separate incidents, that being mile 88, mile 111.2, and mile 243.5, or are there other permanent slow speed orders in rural at different locations, and if so, how many more?
There is permanent slow orders which are set up because of the configuration of the track, the curvature, and those are permanent. So you have track speed, class of track, you have permanent slow orders, and those are there permanently across the whole network, all 22,000 miles. It's not all at 60 miles an hour. Then there is some temporary slow orders that are put on because of the infrastructure. So if we run a geometry test car over and it tells us that we've got ground, the frost is coming out, or you have a heave, it automatically tells us we have to put them on. So yes, we do have a number of locations, and this time of the year it would be normal for us to have a number of temporary slow orders on.
How many additional temporary slow orders do you have?
I do not have that number with me.
Can you provide that number to the clerk of the committee for the committee's benefit?
Sure.
Okay. Obviously, the concern, and this committee stated it in the committee's report that we just tabled not long ago. We want to ensure that slower speed is not a replacement, obviously, for track improvement or track maintenance, and I think we made that clear, and the committee's expressed well. The TSB does suggest that track condition or track failure is a likely similarity to all three Northern Ontario derailments within the rural subdivision. Your response to that, briefly?
Listen, we do our own investigation. I think it's preliminary, but what we found when we were out there, because we do have a number of experts internally on the railroad, and we are more than willing to send things out to have. The first indication is that we had a rail break. Now, it's more important, though, to look at...
In all of them, or in the, are we talking about the March 7th derailment?
The last one was a rail break. They were different, and that's why you have to examine each one of them, and you have to step back and not look at only the cause. We also look at, were the people doing the right thing? Were the inspections done properly? All the things that are important to see if we were missing something, and that's still ongoing, and we await the TSB final report on what they find.
You have 3 derailments within 30 days within the same geographic area. The TSB mentions in their interim report that crude unit trains may may cause different force on track infrastructure, making potential defects or weaknesses in the track more problematic. Has CN done any risk assessment on the impact of unit trains of crude oil on track infrastructure?
We have done risk assessments. We have not done a specific risk assessment in a liquid for that kind of volume. We do operate in other areas unit trains of ethanol in different parts of our railroad.
Right.
We do operate trains that are
not for petroleum crude oil.
No, and that's something that we are going to look at to make sure that we've already looked to see an outside at TTCI, and we'll hire some experts to say, is there something we're missing? We don't think so, but it's not you don't think so. It's let's open up the book and look at everything that we can do to take a look at it.
How many inspections of track did CN do in the rural subdivision last year, 2014? And how many did they do outside of rural across your network?
We do every week we do a minimum of 2, plus we have employees on the trains. They tell us what's going on. There are hundreds of thousands of inspections of the railroad and cars, plus automated sensors, ultrasound. I would say that it's in the hundreds of thousands in each area. It truly is. We have a lot of inspection going on using a wide variety of technology and people.
Okay, thank you. And I'll move to Mr. Komarnicki, 7 minutes.
Very much for that. And certainly the public's confidence in safe transportation of rail products is important, as you mentioned, to the employees, communities, and the customers, but certainly the employees and the communities, and there's many communities you go through. And when, as you say, you have 3 accidents in the general area in close proximity, both in place and time, you have to say what's going on here, and you definitely need to get to the bottom of that. But one of my constituents, or 2 in fact, with respect to the derailment, one said that one of my concerns is the length of these trains, and saying when they were younger they saw far fewer cars connected together than they see now. Some are over a mile long, and wondered if there was something to do with the length of the trains themselves, perhaps the tracks, or any negligence that may be in respect to the repair and infrastructure. And she may be onto something. And then, of course, we read comments like the trains are not only too long, they go too fast, and they're too heavy. And it goes too fast, I guess you've said you've reduced the speed when you're looking to see what the causation may be. So speed obviously is a factor. When you do the unit trains relating to crude, of course, you're talking about a different configuration than you may otherwise have. And so that is a difference in factor. So can you comment in terms of length of train for my constituent who says trains seem to be longer, they seem to be going faster, they're more frequent, and of course the loads are heavy. What do you say to all of that?
Okay. We haven't changed the speed that we operate at as a maximum speed. We operate our freight trains at a maximum speed of 60 miles an hour as long as the configuration of the track is such that it can handle it. So we've never changed that, and it's limited by curvature, the type of track, the area, visibility. We take a lot of factors in place when we look at it, so no change there. The trains we've been operating are the normal crude trains, 100 cars, and if it's a unit train, so somewhere in the 90 to 100. We operate trains that are 150 cars. We run grain trains to the west coast from Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba at 150, 175 cars. The technology's changed. The air brake system has changed. When I hired on the railroad, if you tried to handle a train over 100 cars with the air brake system that was in place there, you just would not be able to release the brakes. You would not be able to handle it that way. It wasn't the issue. We also have DP locomotives, which we can put them on the train in 2 or 3 locations, front and back, operated by one person in the front. So the technology's gotten to the point that we operate trains at our intermodal trains. We run them most days at 8, 9, 10,000 feet. And I apologize for we're still using miles and feet, but we operate them every day at that length. Coal trains going to Prince Rupert, we run them as big as 220 cars. It's a safe way to do it. We've been doing it for a number of years. They're heavy cars, but that's what the infrastructure is built for. It makes us efficient.
And yet I understood in Western Canada, one of the reasons for not hauling the volume of grain that could be hauled normally was because of the cold weather and the reduction in the length of trains.
That's correct. That's what we had last winter. But it's nice to report. I'm glad you asked me about grain. And I looked at it this morning. Fact is that we have our orders, our outstanding orders are less than 2,000 cars of grain on the books that we have today. The weekly amount that we moved last week was 4,861 cars. So it is less than a half a week of backlog. There is no area that has got a backlog of grain going to the U.S., the small producers, people going to the West Coast. We are not picking. The total orders outstanding are around 2,000. It's actually less than 2,000. Let me just say 2,000, and we're handling close to 5,000 a week. And we want to bump it up because the orders went up this week. We're going to do over 5,000 cars. It's all about business and money. Sorry about that.
It's a good plug for what you're doing in Western Canada for sure. But when you have these accidents occurring in that close proximity, in such a short space of time, you've got to say there must be something to do with the infrastructure. You need to test the tracks more, maybe the technology you're using. And I know that when the first accident occurred, I think you received an order to look at what the cause may have been, and it takes some measures as a result of that. Now, when we talked about Gogama and the first accident, what did you do differently after you investigated the first accident that may have been a positive, proactive step that you engaged in that regard?
I think it's a great question, sir. So the first accident happened. The trend line, if you looked at on the slide with NOD, did not give us any outlier that we had an issue in infrastructure, and we still don't. We'll see what we find out at the end. But the normal reaction is to find out. We send in experts, our own experts, to find out exactly what happened. If we need to slow down a piece of track because we don't understand it, we look at the type of rail. We look at who manufactured the rail. Do we have other issues? If it was a rail car, we look at who loaded it, how it was loaded, and we do a lot of homework. These happened so quick to us that we didn't get a clear answer on the first derailment. But after the third derailment, there was no question that we had to react, even without knowing the cause, and that's why we slowed the speed down, even more inspections than we had before, and we wanted to make sure we understood it. So that's what we've done.
And did you take any physical maintenance and repair kind of actions anywhere along those lines?
We did. We lowered our standards. We think that on the first accident, we had a joint failure at a place where the signal system works. So we did drop the standard and made sure that we're going out there way ahead of it to clean that up even faster than we normally would.
You said you take some time to step back and say, we don't understand why this is happening. Sometimes having a third party look at it objectively that's totally unrelated to your operation is a second set of eyes, and you mentioned something about that. Can you maybe amplify that and say, what have you done in that regard?
Well, I think the TSB is great. They showed up on site. They came out there to take a look at it, and they're more than willing always to tell us, listen, we see something here that you should take a look at. I think they are a nice, clear conscience to look at it. They're professional. They know what they're doing, and they give us. Transport Canada shows up and looks at it to see if there's anything, and they give us feedback. And if we don't understand something, we're willing to hire anybody, whether it's the Transportation Center in Pueblo, Colorado, that every railroad in North America works with, scientists that look at the infrastructure and what we can do on the rail cars, or we do it ourselves going out to universities that we partner with. Very important that we get to the bottom of it.
A short, quick question. Your emergency response plan, as planned, compared to how it carried out effectively, how did it work?
You're out of time to answer that briefly.
I think it worked well. I think we reacted very quick and had the right people there to respond.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
4.5, 5 minutes.
One of the things you said at the beginning of your presentation was that in spite of our best efforts, we're still going to have derailments. So when we have derailments with tank cars full of crude oil, they're going to burn and explode. And so we learned that the DOT 111s weren't safe at 12 miles an hour in Lac-Mégantic. Now we've learned that the DOT 1232s aren't safe at 43 miles an hour at Gogama. At what speed is CN prepared to run these trains so that they can be viewed by the public as safe?
Well, I think I don't want to correct you, but I think you said 12.5 miles an hour for Lac-Mégantic?
That was the speed at which the last car broke, according to the Transportation Safety Board.
I think the speed when it derailed was...
The speed when it derailed was 60, but the speed of the last car was 12.
It's a moot point, because the bottom line is we operate on a daily basis and have for years all sorts of products that are used by everyone in North America and in Canada. We handle products that are poisonous, inhalation. We handle products that are used in everyday plastics. We use products that people do, and we handle them in a safe manner.
Well, clearly, you handle them safe in a safe manner, but if the cars that they're in aren't capable of withstanding a collision or a derailment at 43 miles an hour, then they have to go slower than that. That's clearly what the public is going to demand, very clearly, and is what will happen to CN if the public says and the government says 20 miles an hour is as fast as you can run the 1232s until 10 years from now when we get the TC117s. That's going to have to be the response, I suspect. Now, you promised us at the last time you were here to give us a copy of the corridor risk assessments. We didn't get them. What we got instead was a manual on how you did a risk assessment. Can you please provide those risk assessments?
Like I said, we're more than willing to. We give them to Transport Canada already.
Transport Canada has told us that they will not give them to us without your permission. Do you give them permission?
To Transport Canada?
To give them to us?
I would not withhold the permission on a risk assessment.
Thank you so much. You've also talked about, or we've heard that the Gogama situation, you intend to clean it up. You did leave a tank car burning as part of your ERAP. In other words, what we understand is that part of the process of cleaning up the site is to just let it burn. Is that clearly what we understand the ERAP to be? Because if that's in a residential neighborhood in downtown Toronto, that's not an acceptable solution.
Well, you look at the situation of where you are. It's very difficult if it's contained. It's in one spot. It made a lot of sense for us to not try to put it out. The danger, you got to make sure that the danger to try to put it out is more than what the danger is to let it burn in that situation, and that's what we did.
Now, you talked about your trains are now 8,000 to 9,000 feet long. They're now too long for your sidings. They're too long for most of your sidings across the country.
No, they're not. We built the railroad to have sidings long enough.
So if you have to run these trains at 20 miles an hour or 15 or whatever the safe speed is for these 1232 cars, you can, in fact, move them onto a siding and let other trains go past, including VIA.
No, I don't know where you're getting the 15 or 20 miles an hour, but
I don't know what the safe speed, but 43 isn't.
Anytime you start slowing down the speed of trains, and it's just as difficult the other way. We operate VIA trains. I came over by VIA this morning, and we were going at 90 miles an hour on our railroad on the Kingston subdivision. And that gives you a different challenge on how you operate the railroad. So if you slow something down, it gives you a challenge of capacity, and it gives you a challenge of how you operate. So that's very important. You know, I came over here safely. I wasn't worried about it, running at 95, close to 100 miles an hour. I looked out the window to see how fast we were going. I'm comfortable that we operate. But capacity is very important to the railroad.
No, I understand that capacity and profit are very important, but if the 1232 cars can't be run safely at 43 miles an hour, because we clearly have had yet another extreme collision or extreme explosion, railroad disaster, that if it was in a and there but for the grace of God, it wasn't in an inhabited area.
Question.
I do.
Please ask. Well, okay,
So,
I need you to ask it because you're out of time.
We will need the railroads to operate these cars safely. They will need to slow down, will they not?
I think we're clear on the tank cars. We accept what the government has said, and we support the changes that we think have to happen in the industry and the type of car that has to be built. The 1232 car is safer than the .111 car. Is it as safe as the new car that is going to be put in place? No. The reinforcement of the steel, the bottom outlet valves, the top valves on it, the end caps, the amount of insulation in there, the amount of heat it can take. We're on record saying that that's what we want, and I think it's important for us to do that. We have performed risk assessments, and we've decided that we are going to include the speed of not just crew trains, because people want to go only on crew trains, but any train that carries more than what the key train facility is and the number of cars, we're slowing them down into going into census metropolitan areas to 35 miles an hour. We've already have a PIH, TIH restriction at 35 at gateways, and we've included any dangerous good at that speed. So we do our own risk assessments to take a look at and make sure that we're smart about what we're doing.
Thank you. Mr. Braid, you have the last questioning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the representatives for being here today. Just a couple of questions in my remaining time, again surrounding the derailment in Gogama on the 7th of March. Can you tell us how recently before the March 7th derailment that you had conducted track inspections in that area?
Michael, it was just a couple of days before, day before?
That is correct. Just a couple of days before, we had some inspections that had taken place to review the integrity of the track.
And what were the results of that inspection?
The result of the inspection showed no anomaly with the track at the given time.
Okay. And is a track inspection and a risk assessment the same thing, or are those two different things?
No, a track inspection and risk assessment are two different.
Okay.
The track inspection information that you get will feed into what you do with the risk assessment, but they're two separate.
Okay. And when was the most recent risk assessment done then for that section of track in that area?
Michael, was it last year that we looked at the risk assessment over that?
Yeah, that is correct. In reference to recorded risk assessments, we've essentially gone through the complete network where we did our main routes, and we completed that last year. And now we're looking at some of the smaller routes that have lower densities that we're looking at the risk assessment. And when we talk about our risk assessments, it's all encompassing, and it does incorporate elements with regards to sensitive habitats from an environment standpoint, density of populations. It looks at various factors as opposed to just one of, looking at dangerous goods. So it's fairly comprehensive in terms of an overview of the corridors.
Okay. And when the incident occurred on March the 7th, how quickly after the derailment, after the accident, did the emergency response plan go into effect, and what were the steps that you followed?
It's as quick as possible. The train crew finds out that their train went in an emergency, and they call up the RTC center, which is located in Toronto, by radio, and they tell them that they have an incident, and it is started right there.
And through the course of your emergency response plan, the steps that you followed, the ensuing days, explain how you kept the residents of Gogama up to date, how you communicated, and were they kept properly informed from your perspective?
You know what? I'm gonna ask Sean to answer that, even though I was there, because I think a lot of his people did a lot of work to make sure we did that. So Sean.
So in the minutes following the derailment, we reached out immediately to the mayor as well as the federal and provincial MPP and MP to inform them what's going on, that there's been a derailment, and then very quickly deployed a communications group up there to work in the Unified Command with the operating people. We're still there today. As we're speaking today, we have, up until yesterday, we had daily information sessions with the citizens of Gogama to inform them what we're doing on the cleanup side. So very intense outreach to make sure that the citizens were in the know, and not just relying on the local elected officials, including the First Nation community, which is up there, as you know, very active community. So informing them what we're doing on the derailment itself, how we're cleaning up, the environmental impact. We share all information with them, and as we lead towards the future, we can tell them what we're doing and make sure they're part of our decisions as we go forward to make sure that we do leave the site in a very pristine state in light of what's going on. But full outreach to the community, a lot of information back and forth.
And what was the role of Canutech through this process?
Well, you report anytime you have an incident, and if you need some information, it's a two-way discussion. So that's how we do it. Is we have to understand what's on the train, which we do. The conductor carries the information of what's on the train. We also have it in the computer system, and if we need more information, reporting and everything else, that's how we work with the different parties. In fact, the first reporting regulation that we have is we go through the TSB and advise them that we've had an incident, and then they disperse it to a number of different groups.
For how long will the so you've put new temporary measures in place as a result of this particular derailment and the others in the area? How long will these measures be in place?
we'll keep them on until we understand better of what happened there and what we need to do different.
Okay. And based on what you know now, what would you do differently?
A little early to give you a full breakdown on it. I think it's there's a number of things that we have in place, and if I said to you, do I have a black and white clear answer? That's the difficulty about these things, is we don't have a black and white. So we're working through it, and we'll see what we have implemented is the speed reduction, more inspections, looking at different areas that have the same rail types, making sure that we've got senior presence to make sure we don't have a person problem where they weren't inspecting them the way they should. So we've implemented all that, and we're not going to change that until we understand better what happened.
Okay, you're out of time. I'd like to thank you, gentlemen, for being here. You're trying to get my attention,
I am, because I just want to make one quick point, Mr. Chairman.
You're out of time.
No, not directed to these. They have now suggested that Transport Canada is free to give us the risk assessments. Would you and or the clerk please ask Transport Canada to provide those to us, as they denied them the last time they were here?
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thanks again, gentlemen, and meeting is adjourned.